Okay, so we shall make a start. So this is the webinar on the Kickstart scheme. My name is Mark and I shall be your host for the next hour, along with a couple of other special guests from the DWP. So I thought first of all, we'd just go through a little bit of housekeeping. So if we could remember to have your microphones turned off, that would be really, really helpful. And obviously turn on if you wish to ask a question at the end, and then obviously turn off after you've finished asking your question. If you've got any questions that you want to ask, if you write them down in the chat facility, we've got somebody monitoring the chat facility, and at the end of the presentations, we'll then hopefully be able to answer all of your questions. And we are recording the session so we can release it onto our YouTube channel, obviously as soon as we get the recording down from Zoom. So enjoy the session. I'm sure it's going to be very worthwhile your time. So we're going to start off just by having a look at the contents. So we've got Graham Metcalf and Ian Fisher from the Lincolnshire DWP, and they're going to go through why is the scheme be created, how does it work, what is a gateway, what's the job placement criteria, what's needed to apply, how to make a successful application, funding, and then the role of the DWP. Then I'm going to come in and I'm going to give some facts and figures for the whole of the UK, just to give everyone a regional view, and also why you should potentially look at us to be your gateway for you, give you some idea of placements, the process that's involved, what we offer, what happens at the end of the placements and what choices the participants and you have, and how to get involved, and then obviously our famous question and answer sessions. So I'm going to hand over now to Graham and Ian, who will take you through their presentation.
Thanks very much, Mark. To firstly apologise, we're having to use personal iPhones here, a few tech challenges today, so I hope that doesn't hinder people's ability to be able to hear the content. Just to introduce ourselves then, I'm Graham, listed on the top of the slide there, and my colleague Ian's joined us today as well from the partnership team operating around the Lincolnshire area for DWP. I will just say Kickstart itself, I'll go through the features of the scheme as Mark describes, slide by slide, but I will just say the scheme itself is being managed and administered through central teams. Points of contact that you already have established now, through to Mark or any direct lines into DWP are definitely to be retained, because they'll provide the quickest access to solutions as and when matters arise. Thanks, Mark. The next slide, please. Thank you. So the scheme itself is part of the Plan for Jobs offer that was initiated in late summer. The funding you can see from the information on the slide is quite significant. It is intended to be a large scheme. The indications we've had is that if we spend all of that budget, it will be extended. Just in comparison to other extensions or other availability around Plan for Jobs, there were some schemes also with extended eligibility and extended funding attached to that offer, which were traineeships and apprenticeships, so additional funding going into those schemes. Very early stages, we're doing quite a few of these webinars with colleagues from Department of Ed, just to orientate potential partners around the difference between the offers. What I would say on those other schemes, traineeship, apprenticeship, they're already established schemes. The difference that Kickstart has in comparison to those is that it's a brand new scheme. So as a consequence, that is partly the reason why things have taken a little longer than ideal to get to implementation and to get to processes being pulled through and actual placements arriving, because we started from a standing start. So some of you may recall previous DWP initiatives with employer incentives attached and employer subsidies, such as Future Jobs Fund and its predecessor New Deal, which takes us back probably 20 years. Those schemes were long in the planning and long in the implementation pathway. So Kickstart, as I say, started from a standing start, and explains a little why we have encountered some difficulties to just get things to market. That said, the initial interest is really, really strong, and that's played a significant part in that too. So we are very, very hopeful that we'll get lots of opportunities through in the very near future. We've already had some So large organisations such as Tesco, I think, have had offers available from early stages of November. Just to explain, that's been a slightly easier pathway to administer because Tesco's aren't recalling any of the funds, so they're not grant funded, and they're just making their offer as part of the initiative without any recall on funding. So the usual steps around grant funding, which we'll cover later, don't apply to them. Just in terms of the scheme itself, see from the details on the slide there that the arrangements are that the young people who are on placement are paid at the national minimum wage for their age range over the lifetime of the placements. The placements are intended to be for 6 months, and the hours are 25 per week. Now, there are examples where employers want to host people for longer than that duration per week, and in fact want to pay higher than those national minimum wage rates, and that's entirely their prerogative. But what the funding covers is the national minimum wage for the age range of the individual for 25 hours. Thanks, Mark. So what I've used here, again, this is a snapshot of data that we have available, fairly recent data around size of customer bases, and you'll see through the geographies there, they are actually the job centre sites that are contained within the district area that both Ian and I work in, which is Lincolnshire, Nottinghamshire and Rutland. So that's a reference to the volume of young people that are currently on registers in each of those locations. I appreciate that this call is wider than just the Lincolnshire geographic area and Nottinghamshire, but it's just to give a bit of an idea of volumes. The most significant things on those figures is if you compare the first column, which is September 19, to the last column, September 2020, then you'll see in the yearly change at the end of the table just what a dramatic impact there's been on the increase in register sizes, particularly for young people. And the reason the scheme's been initiated is that there's a recognition that when young people are competing in a reduced labour market and against people that already have skills and experience and a demonstrated work history, then it has a squeezing effect on them and their opportunities, hence the formation and the startup of this scheme. Thanks, Mark. The scheme itself, I mentioned briefly, is that placements are intended to be for a 6-month period. The age range of young people are 16 to 24. However, the majority of young people on our caseloads are from 18 plus. There are some exceptions where people can be in receipt of universal credit under the age of 18, but they're few and far between. The idea is that they are developmental opportunities. So we do ask employers that potentially are offering placements to recognise that, because you will encounter those issues that you would usually face with any new recruit, and particularly a young new recruit. What I would say, just reflecting back on the increased volume of customers, is that we do see a very mixed range of young people and circumstances, and consequently there are some already with us that have had skills and experience, and the work that they were doing in the sectors has closed down and is more limited. So consequently, there are already some very able and capable people amongst that customer base, and there are also graduates amongst the volumes as well that haven't had the opportunity to progress on from their degree courses in what would have been the usual way, were it not for an abridged ending to their educational settings. So very much a developmental offer, and even reflecting on graduates, what we do see there is the lack of work experience is the biggest blocker. So this is exactly what the scheme provides. So Mark's operating as a gateway in his company. Where employers want to operate directly, then they need to have volumes of 30 jobs to be able to apply. And then the last bullet refers to the way in which employers with less than those number of opportunities can participate in the scheme, and that's usually through intermediaries, gateway bodies such as Choose ICT. Again, the link on the bottom of the slide does refer to the latest information that's available around Kickstart. And what I would say is, although these slides will be shared, I'm sure at the end of the presentation, the best source of up-to-date information is the information that's loaded on gov.uk. So that's not designed to be a cop-out in any way. These are a useful reference point to these slides, but because it's an evolving scheme, as I mentioned earlier, then there are frequent updates that determine the latest position, and it's definitely the path to follow to get the most up-to-date information is the information on gov.uk. Thanks, Mark. So just what the definition of a gateway representative is shown there. I've alluded to it a little on the previous slide, which is that gateways are those organisations that are representing employers with less than 30 opportunities. In order to get accreditation as a gateway, then there is a due diligence process that the central teams in DWP perform. So Mark's passed that test in order to get to this stage. What gateways have to do is to demonstrate experience of managing partnership agreements, because the method of funding this scheme is through grant funding agreements, which we'll come on to a little later, and also then have the commensurate robust financial and governance processes in order to manage the scheme on behalf of those smaller employers. So again, employers can choose who they connect to based on a number of factors: their sectorial needs, the training offer that's there to support individuals, reputation of the participants or the gateways or the intermediaries, and also geographic location. So there's no fixed requirement on any of those. It's just what suits best and what best suits the circumstances that the employer is encountering. Thanks, Mark. So again, some placement criteria here, which are useful reference points. Obviously, where something like this is initiated, we have to be very careful to ensure that it's not at the expense of positions that were already available or newly redundant positions. That would be unsavoury, and we couldn't support that. So there are some criteria that need to be matched against to be able to get through to validation. And as I say, top one there is replacing existing or planned vacancies, or causing any current employees or apprenticeships contractors to either be stood down or reduce their hours in favour of offering Kickstart placements. That criteria is checked at the point that jobs are submitted by your gateway body. The idea, again, as I say, it's a developmental scheme, so there's no requirement and no expectation that employers will convert their opportunities into permanent employment settings, although what we experience through the management of other schemes that provide workplace opportunities is that we often do see that conversion and those opportunities arising. We're all in the same position in terms of speculating rate of recovery for the economy, so it's impossible to expect that that's a requirement of participation. It's absolutely not, but obviously where there is an opportunity to progress, then we very much welcome that. The idea is that the young person participating will get the opportunity through the developmental placement that they're encountering, that makes them more employable and makes them more competitive in the labour market that they're looking for. So it'll definitely enhance current CV, particularly if there's an opportunity to gain work experience where it's not previously there, and also just those general expectations and developments around being better prepared for interviews. So I'm in the confidence and reliability to rely on the experience gained. The idea is that through the lifetime of the scheme, individuals become more employable through their experience and can progress through the labour market as and when opportunities open up at the end of their placements. Thank you, Mark. So in terms of the application, and Mark will need this from potential employers linked, is we do need Companies House reference numbers or Charity Commission numbers if you're operating in the UK, slightly different arrangements for Scotland, organisation's address and contact details, and details of the placements and their locations. We'll need to be able to determine recent history of job opportunities and how the wraparound support offer that's part of this scheme. So it isn't just the offer of work and the offer of funded waged income, it's also the developmental offer that's there to support young people. So these type of details are subject to what's referred to as spotlight checks, which are held, again, done centrally through national teams. And we are encountering one or two instances where organisations are unable to provide company's house numbers, part of the spotlight checks that go forward will look at recent history of an organisation, how long they've been operating, look at the financial propriety, if any directors are attached that have CCJs or things of that nature. Any hints or suggestions around that can lead to applications for the particular employers being rejected. And a lot of the reason for that is that the money that's being funded is through government grants. So as a consequence, reputational aspect to that, and also they need to have the confidence and that they're funding organisations that are able to deliver if they're okay to do that. Thanks, Mark.
Robert. Hi, Robert. My name's Wayne.
So again, these two areas, and apologies now because I'm squinting a little on my screen, look at some of that information I've just shared around what type of information we need to be able to demonstrate origin of placements, and also of examples of how to demonstrate the support that's intended to be offered as part of the wraparound support, as part of the placement. And there's some hints and tips there as to what factors will be included. Those details can be included on applications that are made at the point that they're submitted. So, for example, when you're submitting those details on the job description, that would help and make it more likely for that approval will be obtained, and strengthen the application per se. They're not kind of unique details, are the sorts of things that you would expect to be able to provide. But as we go through the slides, I'll touch upon what the DWP role is in terms of matching people to opportunities and why that information becomes crucial, because it'll be compared to other opportunities in the locality for the young person. Thanks, Mark. So again, next steps from the point where applications are successful. So the reference to you here is the organisation you're linked with. So in this case, Mark's organisation will be notified when those applications with linked jobs goes in. They'll get an offer which will come through via email to them. They'll then be requested to submit the agreement, submit the jobs, and accept the terms of the grant is an offer. So the actual overall funding that attaches itself to each placement is approaching the £8,000 mark. So it is quite significant where there are obligated offers going in and some high value offers going in. So the job descriptions for each, there's a template for that. So again, the way in which that information is computed in our world, as in DWP's world, is that those job offers and those placements go through onto our system. They're only available through the universal credit system. It's only people, as I mentioned before, that are on universal credit and people there that are at risk of long-term unemployed that are able to apply for those jobs. So that's where they sit. They're not more widely advertised on any other platforms. That's the process at our end. And then again, just a couple of caveats at the bottom to say, yes, there's a lot of preparatory work that can be done to line people up for the opportunities that are around the corner, but people can't physically start until the grant funding agreement is in place, it's all signed off, and all of the requirements around that have been met. That's a fairly, at the point that we get approval, that's a fairly quick process, so people won't be waiting ad infinitum, despite some of the frustrations that have occurred in the early stages where just the sheer volume of applications has been difficult for us to manage, although that is now improving and the timescale for approval is dropping. So I think Mark's had some good news already around the first tranche of applications. Okay, thanks, Mark. So just to touch on the funding. So the funding that's attached is, as described on the slide there, there's £300 for each placement that's paid to the intermediary organisation, Gateway representatives. And there's also £1,500 for each placement that's available too, which, if you're operating through a gateway, is paid through to the gateway. The idea with those monies is that they're designed to support the young person whilst they're on the placement. So that could include things like travel cost, it could include things like clothing, it could, and certainly will, I'm sure, include things like training. All of those factors, the funds can be utilised for that. Again, just a reminder of what information, or sorry, what's funded in terms of wages. It's 100% of the national minimum wage. for the young person dependent on their age during the lifetime of the scheme for 25 hours per week for a maximum of 6 months. There's also associated national insurance contributions, and any automatic enrolment contributions are on there. As I mentioned before, you can pay higher if that's your preference, if you're competing against others in the same sector and wanting to strengthen the offer potentially, and if you're able to do that, that is a way in which I'm sure young people will be attracted to the high rates of pay, as well as a number of other factors around what the opportunities are, where they are, and how it develops them. Thank you, Mark. So again, just a bit of information on the scheduling of payments. So that first £1,500 I mentioned is paid once confirmation of a start is received by us. So the anticipation is within the first week really of the placement, both the £300 will go to the intermediary for their administrative efforts, and also the £1,500 will transfer in that first week. So if there are upfront costs and there are agreements that are in place between the gateway body and the employer for the supply of training, then there's a separate service level agreement that the gateway body will organise with the employers that set out those terms. And so the transfer over of funds is in the hands of the gateway body in those first stages. In terms of payment scheduling for refund of wages, the way in which we'll see that those earnings have been received is via HMRC's real-time information system that downloads to DWP on 4 days a week, 4 times a day. And then we're able to track earnings, and we can see that at a commensurate level. And at that point, we'll then refund the gateway to transfer those funds over. So the first payment is a 6-week period. The reason it's a 6-week period is that the way in which people on universal credit are paid is on a monthly basis, and that will give us the opportunity to see that those earnings have been received, and then thereafter it's on a monthly basis for remaining payments. We often get questions around what happens if a young person leaves, and in those circumstances the wages will be paid up to the point that they've left, and also the £1,500, there's no attempt to recall that if the money's already been committed. So for example, if some training's been procured and then ultimately the young person moves on before that training is received, if it's been paid for already, then there's no attempt to recall any of those funds. The terms again are set out in the grant funding agreement, so I'm sure Mark, when he gets that, will share that with those employers linked to him. Thank you. And I think this is probably our last slide before I hand back to Mark. So just in terms of DWP's role, apart from the wider administration of the scheme for the central schemes as I mentioned, I've referenced again, or previously, sorry, that the scheme's only available to universal credit payments. So again, claimants. So we do get employers asking questions of, well, I've got somebody in mind, can I recruit them? And there have to be somebody that's on our customer base. The jobs will only be available through the universal credit system and can only be referred to through that system. So DWP nationally acts as a decision maker for the application, and they'll communicate direct with either employers who are acting in their own right or with the gateway bodies representing them. Once a successful application is agreed, we'll then ask for the job descriptions, and again, we'll load those onto our system. They'll be available for work coaches to look at. So work coaches is the terminology for advisors, the face-to-face, ordinarily face-to-face advisory service that you see within job centres that is now operating on a virtual basis. That information will be available to our work coaches. Our work coaches will share that information with the customer base, the young people on their caseloads, and promote the opportunities to them. We'll then also, beyond that kind of matching, we'll make the referral through, and that, again, it will depend upon what terms you've set on your job description. So if you want 100 applicants, certainly we can do that for you. If you'd rather that be a lower figure, then absolutely we'll do that. If you'd rather do that over a time scale, again, we'll do that. We'll just match the terms of what you've said, what you've requested of Mark to be put on the job descriptions templates. We'll then make the arrangements with you, depending on the terms of the job description and what application method you've asked for, and we'll follow those requests on your basis. So there's no trespass in terms of your normal process. There's just a reflection of how you want to operate and how you want to progress. And again, if you take people in the early stages and then come back into the scheme for later, with later placements, you're absolutely free to change arrangements if you prefer. It's absolutely fine. It's just based on each individual placement offer that you make. Okay, thanks, Mark. Okay, so I'll hand back to you at this point and then come back in for questions at the end.
Thank you very much, Graham, much appreciated. So that was the DWP presentation on the Gateway scheme. Just want to spend a couple of minutes looking at this for those of you that are outside of the Lincolnshire boundaries. I am a whole of England gateway, so these figures I pulled off StatX this morning, and this shows the 16 to 24-year-olds claiming universal credit in January 20, obviously before the pandemic really took hold, and November 20. And obviously then it shows you an increase. Obviously all areas there's an increase. And if you look at the whole of England, so not including Scotland or Wales, there's been a 120% increase on the individuals claiming universal credit between the ages of 16 and 24. So they have really, really been hit hard during the pandemic, and a lot of them have lost their jobs. One of the things I was going to do, I like my statistics. So between the January and November, there's actually another 465,566 young people that are now claiming universal credit, more than what there was in January. Now, obviously, the scheme's been set up at the moment to provide 250,000 placements. It was good news. That's the first I've heard from Graham saying that they are looking to extend that, obviously when they've got through the first 250 placements. So that's excellent news for the young people who obviously have suffered quite hard in terms of employment wise during these times. So why use us? Well, we are, as has been said, a DWP approved whole of England gateway. So we don't just look at Lincolnshire where we're based, we can go all over the country. We have had successful applications with vacancies, and those vacancies are now being advertised in job centres. We have, which Graham mentioned, along with your application that you put in, we have to stipulate what employability support you're going to give to these young people. I'll go on in the presentation later. In theory, you don't actually have to keep these people at the end of their placements. So we do have a compliant and agreed DWP employability package, which has been accepted, which we can offer to you. Our placement applications, again, I like my statistics. Based on what Graham was saying, in theory, each individual placement, funding-wise, is worth just over £7,500 per placement. We've currently put in applications up to the value of just over £1.9 million, which actually gives us 250 work placements across 30 organisations that we've worked for or working with at the moment. So just to give you some idea, obviously there's a £2 billion fund out there, and ourselves, we've already put in applications for just under the £2 million mark, working with 30 organisations to provide 250 work placements. Quite literally, this scheme is really, really good for companies and for the individuals that will gain these placements. So when I speak to people, I would try to give them some ideas of what positions that they could create. Obviously, these are new positions. So when we have discussions, if they're looking to place them with somebody else who's already working in the companies, we call them assistants or trainees. You can see that we've got such a wide amount of vacancies. Dog handling is one of the ones that always makes me smile. We've got a horse trainee or stables trainee yard person, administrators, junior business analyst. That's for a banking institute in the centre of London. Training sales and marketing executives, garden woodland assistant, catering assistants, online course creators, junior developers, clinic support assistants, nursery assistants, and an event creator assistant. So quite literally, I don't just want you to think about some of the roles that you have at the moment, but obviously what I always say to people is, if I said, what role would you want to create? What would that be? You know, this scheme holds no bounds. So the process, and this is from my point of view, as Graham alluded to, it has been a little bit bumpy from when it was released beginning of September. We will take a standard collection form, which is available on our website. We'll then come back to you with any further details that we might need to make the application stronger. We are putting applications in on almost a weekly basis. We will potentially then get the DWP coming back to us with questions or clarification on what's been said. And then at some time later, that's tongue in cheek, because they've had such the volume of interest in the scheme, we will receive notification and a standard agreement for you to sign. And that will state how many placements that they have agreed to fund. And in return, you will then give the job vacancy templates to myself. I'll obviously check them over, and then we'll pass them on to the job centres to get those vacancies advertised. So what do we offer? We'll obviously give you a discussion about placements. From my point of view as a business owner, I would like you to obviously create as many as you can do. Obviously that's going to benefit yourself as a company or a charity or organisation, and also benefiting the young people. We put the application in for you. We can also offer onboarding support depending on the size of organisation that you have. We have our employability support package that we offer, which again, this comes out of the £1,500 that grant is available per participant. It's been accepted by DWP. At the moment, we're looking at 30 minutes a week required from the placement participant. So not overly onerous on the individual, because obviously first and foremost, we want them to work with you and obviously pick up their work skills. We are using our qualified IAG advisors to offer our employability support package. And another bit that we've also thought of, although this can't be forced, we are going to recommend to individuals, if we can find a course to complement the position that they hold within your company, we would like to ask the individual whether they would potentially like to do that in their own time outside of your work. So this isn't necessarily something that's going to be, detriment to the role, but if they're, for instance, employed as an administrator, but they don't have an administrative qualification, then we might recommend that they do a level 2 or level 3 administration qualification outside of the 25 hours that they work with you. We'll also give them weekly contacts just to make sure things are okay, and then we'll feed back to you as an employer every few weeks, and also we'll do a review at the end of the placement just so we can tell you what the participant thought, and obviously if we can change it ready for potentially the next placements that you offer. And like I've just said, we'll work with you to create more placements, because we've still got up until the end of December 21. In theory, you will get 2 lots of placements in between now and the end of the scheme. So one, obviously, starters in January, and then starters in July as well. End of placement choices. So as Graham's said, at the end of the placement, you can, and obviously that would be the most fantastic outcome, is employ these participants. So if they've made such a difference to your business and you can't obviously live without them, then obviously you can take them on. Obviously hours and pay rates are completely up to you. You can also turn the participant into an apprenticeship scheme. So for those of you that are not too au fait with the modern apprenticeships, they are now based right up until degree level. So they're not just the same level as what they were in yesteryear, which was the same level as going to college. These are college and degree levels and can be taken at any age as well. You can also release the participant, but obviously the difference that they're going to have is when they came to you 6 months beforehand, they will have excellent and very, very strong work-based skills. And they will also have very, very good employability skills that obviously we will teach them with you. So if you aren't in the position to offer them employment or an apprenticeship, you can then release them out into the workplace, and hopefully they will get snapped up nice and quickly with their excellent work and employability skills. And you can also employ another participant. So, if you create half a dozen placements in January, then there's no reason why. Obviously, if everything works well, we can then create another 6 for you halfway down the year next year. So getting involved, one of the things I want to do before we do questions and answers is just get you to think outside the box, really. Could a position in your business, could you do with an extra pair of hands? The DWP have encouraged businesses to try something new. So this is an ideal opportunity. If you want to try something new within your business and workforce is holding you back, then let's have a conversation. We can put that in the application, and there may well be an opportunity to try something new by using the work placements in your business. Share someone's workload. So obviously we know at this moment in time, very, very hard some of our staff are working, or all of our staff are working. So if you need to share somebody's workload, this is an ideal opportunity to do that. Again, the caveat being it can't replace an existing role. Obviously, we're hoping it's going to increase your profit. And again, the contract is going to pay national minimum wage for 25 hours a week for 6 months and associated costs. And as Graham said, there's a 1,500 grant monies available, which covers setup costs, employability support, and equipment costs as well. So it really is a win-win for the individuals and for business all the way through. So I'm going to open Graham's microphone and the person who's looking at the questions, Lucy, and just see if we've got any questions that need to be answered. Thank you very much.
Well, I think you guys must have done such a great job, because we haven't got any questions in the chat box, but I don't know whether anybody wants to unmute themselves and ask any questions for Graham and Mark. Please feel free.
Because I've got one question just around what if it doesn't work out with the individual? Do you have to go through the full 6-month contract with them?
Graham?
Hi, no, no, you wouldn't. It would be the same circumstances that apply in any other workplace situation. So particularly if the feeling's mutual, but if not, it's something you need to initiate. Then we will be in touch from a DWP perspective. The work coach that's referred, we'll keep in touch in terms of how the young person's doing. So there's some channels and some routeways there. If there's some impending bad news coming, but if it doesn't work out, yeah, you would just terminate employment in the same way you would in any other circumstances. There's no problem with that. There is almost an expectation that given that dealing with a young person customer base, and we will see the full set of circumstances and characteristics that usually apply in those areas. What I would say is that probably helps just validate Mark's offer around pre-employment training and input. Because what we're looking to do by using those programs is to just orientate young people and around the expectations of the world of work. So those without experience certainly would benefit from just knowing what to do, what not to do, how to conduct themselves, what's expected of them, etc., etc. But then again, I just wouldn't want to give the impression that every candidate will have those same circumstances. I think that's unlikely given the vast numbers we're seeing. There are already people that have got skills and experience. But just to reiterate, yeah, it's in your hands in much the same way as it would be with any other employment termination.
Right, thank you for that.
Thank you. Anybody else, any questions?
Yeah, I have. Hi. Yeah, can I ask, we're gardeners, so we probably wouldn't want anybody till about March time. Could we sort of set the balls in motion now, sort of to start them in March?
Yeah, of course you can, Catherine. So what I will be speaking to you about is obviously getting the application in sooner rather than later. So obviously when it comes through, when you provide us with the job templates, it actually specifies on there when the job will commence. Right. So hopefully we'll have a nice lot of people in March ready to go and obviously hit the ground running with you. Yeah. So I mean, we would only, obviously, because we would work through you. We would only have to employ maybe one person. Or however. That's absolutely fine. That's the whole idea of the scheme, and hopefully, as you potentially grow during this time, then, you know, we might be able to look at some more as we go through the year,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a pleasure, Catherine. Right then, I think that's it then, if there's no further questions. My contact details are on there. Please feel free to email me or give me a ring, or you can also look at the Kickstart section of our website. So my company is Choose ICT Ltd. We do Traders Skills 365 because we're actually an online training provider as well. So please have a look at the website. There is a link on there to the Google form where we just take basic information from you, enough to give you a call back and discuss the options. It is a truly remarkable scheme, and I know it's been an absolutely awful year, but obviously for our businesses next year, if we can obviously take some of these people on and make a difference to their lives going forward, I think it's a really admirable thing to do. And obviously it'll help you and obviously the individual as well. So thank you very much, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thank you very much. That's been really useful.
No worries at all. Thank you very much.